So earlier this week, was it this week?
Yeah,
earlier this week, Alex DOWSETT put out a video explaining his retirement, and Chris, who's been on various videos, not least the Chris Boardman Wind Tunnel, that was one of them.
Yeah.
A couple of stages of the Grand Tour. Messaged me and said, have you seen the latest video? I watched it. So Chris contacted me, thought it'd be a really good idea if we made a short little video as a bit of a kind of thanks to Alex for the first sort of block of his career, because obviously he's still very young and still got a lot to do. I mean, speculating between us, weren't we, what we think he might be going on to do. I'm sure it'd be an exciting thing to watch. So I thought we'd talk first of all about some of our actual sort of direct experiences with Alex, and you, Mr. Newman, you had some first-hand experience of racing Alex.
Yeah, I'd almost say it wasn't. It almost wasn't racing him. It was just being in the same race as him, because he was that much quicker. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of when it was that he kind of emerged on the scene. I reckon it was like 2004, 2005, around about then.
Yeah.
Definitely by 2005. But he just became one of those people on the scene where, I mean, you've got to remember, like back in my day, I mean, we're talking, you know, pushing on sort of 18 years ago or so now.
Wow.
TTing for juniors was pretty different. Like, the kit was not what it is now. Understanding and experience what it isn't what it is now.
Yeah.
And you know, all of a sudden you had this junior that turned up, and it wasn't a case of will he win junior X, Y, or Z. It was a case of he was winning open events, and as a junior, that just, you know, there was one or two people who really ever did that back then. Now you've got your, you know, your Josh Tarlings and that who will rock up and do it anyway. And I think the current trend is kind of, you know, juniors are expected to be knocking on the door of that because you've got people winning the Tour de France at 21.
Yes.
But in 2004 that wasn't the case, and yeah, he was just an absolute machine, just handing it to the field. And you know, there was only a couple of other people really that were anywhere near him, but generally speaking, when you saw his name on the start sheet, you knew, well, I wasn't racing for second place anyway, but you knew that generally speaking he'd be racing for the win and everyone else would be taking first loser. The two standout experiences that I have of him was the National 25s that happened, TTs, I know this, on the Wales course.
Oh yeah.
Was it RH3 something or other?
The one with the negative elevation.
Yeah. And it was a horrendous day. It was like, I can't begin to describe. I've only ever raced that course twice, and both times it's been absolutely biblical. And it was just this crazy headwind, and you basically ride out to the turn, you do this big downhill, and then it's a longer stretch out to the turn and 9 miles back. And I think out to the turn was, yeah, about 18 miles or so. Yeah, about sort of, what, 16, 17 miles or so, I think. And I mean, in that time, I think he put 9.5 minutes into me onto the turn.
Wow.
And I'm proud that I only lost about 2 or 3 minutes on the way back. But that was just because everyone had run out of gears because the tailwind was so strong. So it didn't really matter how quick you were. And he won that by an absolute country mile.
Right.
And then the other one that really sticks in my mind was I think it was the National Circuit Champs, I want to say maybe 2006. And at this point he was riding for his team, and they'd become a bit of a hub for quick juniors.
Right.
And there was someone else on his team, and this was a lapped course. And it was one of the few events I've been to where I was off as one of the first riders, because you go in reverse order of, you know, quickest at the end. Yeah. And he was one of the last ones off, and it's one of the few events I've done where you basically get your lap splits halfway round.
Oh.
So we're all in the HQ waiting to see who had won, and the first lap came in and everyone was like, is he up or down? And one of his teammates was up by about 8 or 9 seconds, and everyone was like, DOWSETT's going to lose. Like, DOWSETT doesn't lose, but DOWSETT's going to lose today. And then the results came in, and he just put out this insane negative split and absolutely rinsed it still. And it was, yeah, just one of those things you just knew. It was one of those people where you sit there and you kind of go like, he's going to win a Tour de France stage one day, he's going to win a Grand Tour stage one day. And he kind of made it look possible, if that makes sense. Because he was a reference point. And again, this is before the days of power numbers and knowing what kind of watts per kilo you need to do to go up a climb at like Grand Tour speed. He was just someone who you could look at and be like, right, well, he is likely and he's likely to end up there, and he's X amount of minutes quicker than me, so I by default am X amount of minutes quicker off. You know, I'm off the pro pace by that much.
Yeah, it's an absolute litmus test, isn't it? So you talking about he's brilliant pacing. Neatly brings us on to 2015 with the hour record attempt, and for me, I mean, there's an awful lot to talk about with this when he was riding for Movistar. But for me, I think the most sort of incredible thing about the hour record was that afterwards, after he took the record, he was saying that he knows he could go quicker. That, you know, the pacing strategy was absolutely done to perfection, but at the same time, he knows in his heart of hearts he could have gone deeper. And that's the thing that stood out to me in 2015. Yeah,
I remember his post-ride interview, and they were like, you broke the hour record, like, how was it, how did it feel? And I think he sort of with shock kind of went, all right, actually, you know, and I think he was sort of like, I think he thought it was
gonna be sheer hell.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it wasn't, but you know, like I think...
I mean, you know, Merck said it took years off his life, and we've all seen, you know, Bob Bridge and stuff really suffering getting off. And, you know, DOWSETT just sort of seemed to be, like you said, all right, like he said, I was all right.
Yeah, all right. I think it's the difference between going out to take the record or break the record and going out to ride as far as you can in an hour.
Yeah, and risking it to some extent.
Yeah, and obviously you see the difference between the two. I know we'll mention it a bit more later, but you see the difference between the two, between that one and his 2021 effort. And obviously, you know, winning does a lot for making your bad legs feel good at the end of a race. You know, like if you've broken the record or you've done what you set out to do, pain kind of disappears a little bit.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's exacerbated if you didn't.
I think anybody from the TT scene in 2015 just felt this huge amount of pride. You kind of think, oh, he's one of us. He's someone who's, you know, he's grown up, he started racing as a junior just doing local 10 TTs in Malden. And now he's a world record holder, you know, and it was a huge amount of kind of pride I think the community felt around it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's something that the videos he started making really revealed to us even more than we already knew. But he's just an ordinary guy, but he's also an extraordinary guy. And actually, I'm gonna go right here. That brings us to 2018. In 2018, I was on the committee of a triathlon club for my sins, and I decided, literally last minute after a committee meeting in the pub at about 8 o'clock at night, that I was going to drive to Yorkshire to go and watch Alex race the World Time Trial. It was just literally last minute. I just decided to fill the van up and go. I had time to look on Google Maps like any good time trialist and scope out the route and look for a lay-by. Just at the end of a slight rise.
Which, out of context, all of this sounds horrendous.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I turned up there, it was pitch black, and you know,
the headlights to the local.
Absolutely
TTs.
right. Yeah, no, come on, this is Yorkshire. They wouldn't do anything as depraved as that. And yeah, I took all my cameras, which at the time was 3 or 4, I think, and I had them all set up on this rise. And then I decided, in fact, these mics, I decided to try these mics out, and I rode into the start town just to try and get a bit of the vibe really on my cross bike. And I got into the village where all the team buses were. I went and stood by where DOWSETT's bike was set up, literally as he arrived, and he walked straight past me and did an interview with Eurosport, which I then filmed and basically stole. And it was perfect. I mean, the whole idea was to go out there and watch him race, but I actually had the opportunity to hear him talk to guys at Eurosport. And then I pointed out stupidly, and if he ever watches this, he won't remember this, but I felt terrible afterwards. But my mind went back to, you know, famous people that have been late for their start times.
Yeah.
And I looked at his watch and it was wrong. So I said to him, your time on your watch is wrong. And he just looked at me and went, yeah, I know. And I was like, right, I feel like an absolute idiot here. But if I hadn't said anything and he had been late, I would have felt terrible. So, but I felt like a bit of a fool. And went back to my van, filmed it all, packed up the van, drove back, and I did that. I got back at 8 o'clock the following day, and it was a full 24-hour mission to go and watch Alex race, and 8 hours of that 24 hours was driving. So it was well worth it. They even used some of my footage in their video actually, and they credited me, which people don't bother doing. But yeah. So that was 2018. So that brings us on to the Giro win, right? So where do we start with that? I'll briefly talk about my experience of it, because there's a caveat attached to it, that in the first part of 2020 my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, so I was an emotional wreck anyway. And then when Dowsett went out of that breakaway, I mean, I was in my living room pedalling for him, and I was just in pieces. I was absolutely in floods of tears. It meant the absolute world at the time. So I struggle a little bit to talk about that one without it becoming all about me. So I'll let you take over, because you're probably a little bit less, because you're a cold guy, right? No emotion.
Yeah, it's all about the numbers. What watch did he do? No, mate, yeah, so I think I wasn't too far off what you were describing, to be honest. I think because of his YouTube videos, you knew what it meant. You had that context, which you don't often get with professional sportsmen, where you knew it was contract year. I'm pretty sure by this point he'd announced, or they knew that they were going to be having their first baby the following year. Yeah. And I think like me and my wife were trying or thinking about starting a family around the same time. And you know, it all kind of, I don't know, it all kind of hit home. I think like he being like, well, he's 1 year above me, you know, age-wise, which was always a blessing, because it meant I had a good chance in a national age group field. And had I been a few months older, I'd have been screwed. But he, you know, you're sitting here like having someone like, you know, when you're in your early 30s in the real world, you don't think of yourself as old, you know. And you've got someone who's a year older who you used to race against talking about whether or not they're going to have to retire from their dream job. Yeah. And yeah, you know, seeing him do that, and you know, it was obviously a lot more goes into it, but so much of that win I think came down to him just wanting it and just sort of, you know, needing it, and that absolute sort of, yeah, that need to win. Yeah. And
it's unbeatable, that feeling. We've all, you know, I'd say most of us have had that feeling at some point. To just that. It's an extra gear, isn't it? It's worth 100 watts.
Yeah, and I think like the best part about all of that was that his celebration across the line, dodging I'm pretty sure there was like a three-legged dog on the road or something, wasn't it? Right, yeah. But just that celebration that he did was just sort of like, you see all these things, and you know, don't get me wrong, I'm a massive Tom Pidcock fan, and I love it when he Supermans across the line or whatever. But just that absolute unplanned just outpour of emotion as he crossed the line. Well, I've literally got goosebumps thinking about it now.
Me too, totally have. I was just thinking about Matt Rendell's tweet actually. He was talking, I think he mentioned something about Kodak moments. Yeah. And he was saying how, you know, a lot of the people when they cross the finishing line are thinking about what it's going to look like blown up to poster size on their wall, you know? Yeah. Whereas it didn't look like Dowsett even realised there were other people there.
Just lost in the moment.
Completely, and that's, you know, that's total flow, isn't it? Yeah. That's, you know, a case of being in total flow state and just being completely consumed by the moment, and all else is just fritters away. Absolutely mind-blowingly cool. Yeah. So, the last thing, last year, the hour record attempt, and you know, he beat his previous record, he beat Wiggins's record, and I think much more than that, he proved something to himself, and he also made a massive impact for the haemophiliac charity Little Bleeders. That is a big part of his life, of course, and I think that's got to be better. I mean, I'd love to ask him, you know, which one meant more, whether it was the Giro win or the second hour record, you know, or the second hour record attempt, in terms of sort of what it means. But I thought that was, I'm trying to work out whether I've ever actually watched an hour record attempt and watched every lap. I know I did with Wiggins's, But it somehow felt different, didn't it?
Yeah, I think the thing with an hour record, when you read the headline, it disguises so much. And you know, it's more so than any other event. It's pretty much completely binary. You are either an hour record holder or you're not. Yeah, and the pain is the same. You know, the effort is the same, but either you've succeeded or you haven't. I think it's easy to look at it in that way. Yeah. But I completely agree. Like obviously, like we knew about his haemophilia when we were juniors. I say we as in like collectively. And that was the first thing I'd ever heard of it. I didn't know what it was. I'd never understood what this thing was. And you know, I remember thinking at the time like, oh well, that explains why he's a TTer then, because you know, not in a bunch race, less chance of crashing, all this kind of stuff.
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it was sort of, I think, the thing about him that is kind of amazing is the fact that he's managed to straddle this middle ground between, most of the time you kind of forget he's got it, and I like that about him. You know, it's never an excuse, it's never a hindrance, it's never a if I didn't have, or you know, a sympathy case around it. It's a matter of fact thing. But at the same time, he never lets it slip from the forefront in terms of if he feels like he has a greater purpose from it. Like, I can only imagine what it's like to be a little 10 or 11-year-old kid who has this disease or this illness, which, you know, I'm sure a lot of people are telling you is going to be life-limiting, and it's about the things you can't do rather than the things you can do.
Absolutely.
And then you've got this ambassador like Alex who's essentially proving people wrong the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really ask for much more, really. I mean, at the end of the day, when we're long gone, you know, those little things that mean so much to us, you know, they're gone forever, aren't they? They're in our memories only. It's those things, the differences you make to others, that really stay. And I think that's the big thing that really got me about that. And I think also, clearly how much it meant to them as a family. You know, Chanel, that photo of Chanel.
Oh, and the chairs afterwards.
Just kind of like, oh, that mix of emotions must have been horrific. You know, I think that's the cool thing about the YouTube videos. It's made a big difference to getting an insight into the thoughts and the processes of what a lot of the time is kind of presented to us quite clinically, isn't it?
Yeah.
Understandably so. It's a business at the end of the day. So with that, I'll sign off. Thank you so much for everything you've done so far, and let us see behind the curtains a little bit, Alex. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Yeah, definitely. Just echo what you said, really. It was, you know, I think people like you give people like me a good opportunity when we're old and grey to turn around and be like, I raced him once.
Yeah, I didn't get that opportunity, but
I reckon if you drove to Malden, you'll get another one. I don't see him hanging up his wheels altogether.
I think you might be right.
I think he'll still be smashing it.
It all becomes speculation now, but I know that he's has been involved with
Body Rocket.
Yeah, and also, you know, him and Hutch are pretty close.
Yeah.
And it'd be really nice to see what those two could put together. You know, for us mere mortals, to try and eke out whatever we can out of the limited handful of watts that we've got. Nice one, Alex. Here's to the next load of years of riding, racing and following on YouTube.